This is IC5146, a small emission reflection nebula not too far from the much larger North America Nebula Complex. It is an intricate and colorful structure, but what you may find most interesting about this image is that all the information was acquired in 2024 on the night of September 12th, 16th, and 17th, and on the night of September 12th there was a 56% moon, and on the nights of the 16th and 17th there was a 91 and 96% full moon. And on top of that, it wasn't an ordinary full moon, it was a supermoon, which can be as much as 30% brighter than other full moons. All of the information to create this image was acquired under Moonlight, and 2 of the 3 nights were nights of full moons. On top of that, on the nights of the full moon, the moon was up for the entire night. I believe I have found a way for astrophotographers to continue to gather good information on nights when the moon is very bright, and in the next few minutes, I'm going to show you how. To do this, you're going to need to understand 3 strategies and techniques. First and foremost, you'll need to know how to defend against the moon. These are strategies to minimize the moon's effects on an image. I covered them in detail in a previous video called 6 Strategies to Keep on Imaging When the Moon is Bright. It is linked in the description below and above and to the right. You're going to need to understand and apply frequency separation. This is a strangely often neglected technique that I consider absolutely crucial to getting good sharpness and color. Frequency separation allows you to separate the high and low frequency information from an image. Low frequency information contains an image's color and brightness, and high-frequency information contains the image's detail. Separating them allows you to work discreetly with them, pushing them each further in developing and getting more out of the information. And in this case, separating the high and low-frequency information is what allows you to remove the moonlight from an image, even if you are imaging on a night of an extremely bright moon, such as a full supermoon. I have covered frequency separation in depth in 2 previous videos, take sharpening further with frequency separation, and extract and composite high-frequency information back into an image to increase definition. Both those videos are also linked in the description below and above and to the right. And you should also understand a process I call synergistic sharpening, which I covered in a previous video, called Combine the Orton Effect and Synergistic Sharpening for Unbelievably Crisp Images. It too is linked in the description below and above to the right. And I have produced a series of videos already that shows how all of these strategies are seamlessly combined to produce an image in a playlist called Image Processing Complete Workflow. It's also linked in the description below. I know that's a lot of background information and you don't have to study it all right now, but you will be able to apply this technique the best if you take the time to study that information at some point, because the technique is not something that really can be done in a vacuum. It can work by itself, but it's much better when it's applied with especially the moon defense strategies and synergistic sharpening. Of course, the benefit is, if you learn to do this well, you will no longer be restricted by moonlight. You will be able to gather good information and make beautiful images, regardless of the moon phase. Alright, let's step through the process. Step 1. Defending against the moon. No technique can provide good information unless precautions are taken to defend against moonlight. The strategies that were applied to acquire this image were, first of all, choosing a target some distance from the moon. IC5146 was over 100 degrees from the moon. And another key technique was the strategic application of filtration. The colors of light that our atmosphere tends to refract the strongest are, in order of strength, first blue, then green, then red. To minimize the effects of moonlight on the base information, we haven't gotten to base information yet, but we'll come back to it soon. This strategy was applied, and I was shooting in LRGB. So, in LRGB or RGB, the strategy works like this. If it reaches nautical dark before the moon comes up, use your blue filters till the moon is about 10 degrees over the horizon, no more. After that, switch to your green filters, and you can carry on till the moon is about 20 degrees over the horizon. After that, do all your remaining shooting with the red filter. And continue that until the moon sets. When the moon once again gets low on the horizon, say around 20 degrees, you can switch to a green filter. And when the moon gets down to about 10 degrees, you can switch back to your blue filters. If shooting LRGB, you may be wondering where the luminance filter fits into this. The luminance filter is very powerful and catches all light and makes a monochrome camera about twice as effective at gathering light than a color camera. But it's also unfortunately very good at catching blue and green light, which is very strongly affected by moonlight. So, if you're going to use a luminance filter, you should use it at the same time that you would shoot with your blue filter. Now you can scrub a lot of the interference from moonlight out of an image using a technique I just call moonlight scrubbing, which I covered in detail in the video 6 strategies to keep on imaging when the moon is bright, and I'll review it in brief here later on, but if you feel confident with it, then you can shoot in luminance during the green part of the sequence too. To shoot effectively during moonlight, you're going to need to acquire low-frequency base information. Every image is comprised of high and low-frequency information. Here is the high-frequency information of IC5146. It contains all the structure and detail information of an image. Here is the low-frequency information of IC5146. It contains the information pertaining to color, light, and shadow. This low-frequency information is what is especially vulnerable to moonlight. I won't say the high-frequency information is impervious to moonlight, but it is much more resistant. In a layer-based photo editor, it is not difficult at all to separate high from low-frequency information. Here, I've opened the information on IC5146 with the stars removed in Affinity Photo. In the drop-down menus overhead, I'm going to go to Filters and go down to the Frequency Separation option right here. Clicking on it will open the Frequency Separation tool. The tool divides the desktop into 2 parts. On the left, we can see the high-frequency information, and on the right, we can see the low-frequency information at whatever scale the radius separation bar is set to. When the slider bar is scaled down, less high and low frequency information is separated. And when scaled up, more low and high frequency information is separated. By moving the bar back and forth, we can see the influence of the separation on each region of the image. To apply the frequency separation tool, all we have to do is hit apply. Our starless image will be torn into 2 new parts, a low frequency layer and a high frequency layer. If I make the low frequency layer invisible, all we see is the high frequency information, and if I make the high frequency layer invisible, all we see is the low frequency information. Now what makes this technique work is that while low frequency information is much more impacted by moonlight than high frequency information, it is also much faster to acquire low frequency information. Anybody who shoots with a monochrome camera, especially in LRGB, knows, for example, that you can acquire color information much faster than detail. And while you cannot acquire light information quite as fast as color information, it's still also faster than catching detail. So what you want to do is acquire good low-frequency information on a night that the moon is manageable. Thus, I shot this image of IC5146 on September 12th when the moon was at 56%. Not only was the moon at 56% that night, but there were roughly 9 hours of nautical darkness, and the moon was only up for 3 of those hours, leaving the rest of the night in complete darkness. This base information should be fully developed to the best of your ability to maximize the appearance of the image. A start plate is derived from the base RGB information only. From our example image, I've saved this as a lossless TIFF for later use. And from our example base layer, the high and low frequency information should also be separated, like this. They are then also saved as lossless TIFFs for later use. In the final stages of developing, the base high and low frequency information will be composited back together, and this low frequency information will become the base of color and light for the rest of the information gathered during the nights of the very bright full moon. Let's pause a moment to run a brief detour into moonlight scrubbing, because this technique is absolutely crucial to getting good low frequency information if any of it has been shot during a night of a partial moon, especially if the moon is a half moon or more. As the moon waxes, it becomes brighter. But even a half moon is only 1/6 as bright as a full moon. So frequently you can gather good low frequency information on a night of a half moon or even a little beyond, say 60-65% of a moon, as long as you're careful to scrub it. Now, as the moon waxes, its brightness increases and its influence on the atmosphere will likewise increase. But its effects begin way over on the dark side of a light curve within a histogram. This means that much of moonlight can be scrubbed out by very slightly and strategically increasing the black points of the color channels where the moonlight has the most impact. In this image of the Pac-Man Nebula, the moonlight can most be seen in its impact in the dark space around the nebula. And it's also impacting the nebula itself, but it's most visible in the dark space where it creates that haze. And since our atmosphere wants to refract first blue then green light, the low impact of moonlight will impact mostly blue and green. And you can see the haze around the Pac-Man Nebula is mostly in the colors of blue and green. The best way to scrub this, in a layer-based photo editor anyway, like Affinity Photo, is to use a Levels tool. With the Levels tool, you can pick the color channel to operate on and pick the exact percent of the low side of the light curve that you want to extract by raising the black point. But one last thing to bear in mind is that even though while moonlight impacts blue in our atmosphere the hardest, our perception of brightness is strongly related to green. Thus, we're a bit more sensitive to the green color, and the green color also has a powerful impact on the other colors. So the first thing we want to do is scrub the green. With the Levels tool, I'm going to select the green channel and then just increase the black point by 2%, which scrubs the moonlight's impact on green right out of the image. Notice how much better the image looks with the black point increased in green. The moon's influence in the green range is by and large extracted. It lingers a little, so I'm going to further constrict the brightness at which green can appear, which restricts the moonlight from the darker regions of the image, by sliding the gamma up just a little bit. Now, the influence of the moonlight in the green dark space is pretty well scrubbed out of the image. Let's switch to the blue channel and get the rest of that moonlight out of the image. The influence of the moon is not as strong at this range, even in the dark space, so increasing the black points in blue by just 1% is enough to scrub it, and I'll get any lingering traces of that blue out. Also, by moving up the gamma on the blue channel just a tiny bit. Gamma is a function that restricts the influence of light or color by brightness. The more you slide gamma up, the more that color or light can only appear within a certain range of brightness. And if you slide it down, any color or range of light can appear in more ranges of brightness. Or in other words, moving the gamma down will allow colors to spread out more. To learn more, please reference the video 6 Strategies to Keep on Imaging When the Moon is Bright, and look up the section on moonlight scrubbing. The information captured from nights 2 and 3, September 16th and 17th, was all caught beneath the illumination of the bright supermoon. As stated earlier, the full moon on the first night was at 91% and it was at 96% on the second night. The procedure for shooting the information from both nights was the exact same. Later you'll see the procedure for developing was also similar. You may be surprised to learn there is nothing you have to buy. There are no special filters or cameras or telescopes for that matter or anything else. Stealing information back from the moonlight is all about technique. So while imaging through these nights, typical imaging strategies are all that's employed. So in my case, for example, I'm imaging with a Player 1 Aries M attached to a Celestron 203mm Schmidt Cassegrain telescope, and because I live in a dark sky site, I almost always shoot in LRGB. So this information was shot with ZWO LRGB filters using my usual sequence, which involves 60-second exposures, 60 luminance, and 20 each of red, green, and blue. I'm sure this is counterintuitive. We astrophotographers have a strong instinct to take defensive measures against the moon, but as you'll see later, it's entirely unnecessary. Shown here is my Nina sequence from another target I was imaging on another night. My screen capture of the sequence of IC5146 was corrupted, so I had to use this. This next part is very important. Stack and develop the information from each night separately. Do not blend the information, but make a discrete image from each night's data. Let's say you got your base information under a night of a quarter moon. Stack that separately. Separate your star plate, you'll need that later. Develop the base information, and then split the developed information into its high and low frequency components, and save those for later use. Then let's say you had another clear night about a week later and the moon was well into waxing gibbous. You would stack all that information and develop it separately. Then let's say you had a few more cloudy nights and then a couple clear nights, but unfortunately they fell on a night of a full moon. Go ahead and shoot your DSO under that full moon, and then stack and develop each of those images separately. Because the effect of the moon on the information you are capturing will change each night, it helps to stack and develop each night's information on its own. A notable exception is you may stack base information from multiple nights together if there was little moon. Let's move on to how to process high layer information. That's information shot under a bright moon, and therefore will not become base information. Stack high layer information as you would normally do. Working with LRGB, you would end up with 4 LRGB masters from any given night. Narrowband would typically yield HAS2 and O3 masters from any given night. And color would give you a single color master from any given night. In my workflow, the first thing I do after I have stacked information is I run Blur Exterminator on it, first in the correct mode, which will round and correct any small aberrations in the stars, and then in the default mode, which will deconvolve the stars and sharpen everything. Then you'll want to align that night's high layer information with your base image. Remember, the base image is shot when the moonlight is low. Here, in PixInsight, I'm using the star alignment tool to do just that. I've set the base image with the stars as the reference image. It's important to include the stars because star alignment needs them. Then I'll drag the Night 3 master tabs into the window for the target images. Then just hit the round action icon, and the star alignment tool will quickly get the new high layer information aligned to the base information. Once they are aligned, I get them organized back in place to make it easier to work with them. And then for me, the next standard step in my workflow, you do not have to do things this way, it's just how I do it, is I run the statistics tool on the RGB masters, find the one with the highest median, and the image with the highest median becomes the reference image for the linear fit tool. Then I action the linear fit tool on the other two color images. So in this case, the green had the highest median, it will become my reference image in the linear fit tool, and I'll action the linear fit tool on the red and blue masters. If you're wondering why I don't just use spectrophotometric color calibration, like so many things with PixInsight, I have found it wanting. I don't like what it does with the color. And if it doesn't give a default good color right off the bat, it can take ages to find the correct white balance from its various reference options. To me, it's just a nonsense way of going about things. I'm going to change the color anyway as I go about my own color balancing, so linear fit gives me a good, acceptable result 100% of the time. Once linear fit has worked its magic, I then run the channel combination tool and combine the RG and B masters into a color master. The star exterminator is then run on the unstretched RGB outcome with large overlap selected and generate star image and unscreen turned off. We only need the star image from the base data, not from later on. Using the perfect histograms in 60 seconds evolved method, a video that I put out just last week, but a very successful histogram stretching technique that I've been using for a very long time, I will apply a quick stretch to the image and then denoise it. Afterwards, my work on this image in PixInsight is finished, and I will save it as a lossless TIFF to export later into Affinity Photo, my layer-based photo editor. By the way, if you want to reference perfect histograms in 60 seconds evolved, there is a link to it in the description below. When I'm done operating on the RG&B master, I will open up the luminance master, and I won't walk you through the whole process because it's almost the exact same thing. With, of course, the difference that I will not run a statistical analysis nor linear fits on the luminance because there's nothing else to combine, it's just the luminance channel. Once opened, all I have to do is run the star exterminator, remove and discard the star plate, then do an evolve stretch on its histogram, then run the noise exterminator on it at default settings. At that point, I will also save it as a lossless TIFF and export it for further developing in my layer-based photo editor. I do no developing at all in PixInsight. I just honestly, even though I know this is going to bother some people, I really do not consider it a good photo editor. It's great for stacking images, and the subframe selector is very nice for determining which are your good subs. But PixInsight lacks a number of tools I consider crucial, and the fact that it is not a layer-based photo editor, to me makes it useless. And there's no way I know of in PixInsight to steal information back from the Moonlight. Now we're into the mid-game of developing. I'll open Affinity Photo and extract the high-frequency information from the images shot when the moon was bright. I'll begin by dragging the Night 3 RGB master into the Affinity Photo desktop, and then I'll drag in the Luminance master right on top of it. Now, for this technique of stealing information back from the moon, or being able to shoot under a bright moon, all we need and want is the high-frequency information from any image shot under a bright moon. That could be a full moon, or maybe your DSO was close to a partial moon when you shot it. So we only need to do the most basic development here. With the luminance layer placed over the RGB layer, I'm going to find the best composite mode for it. Compositing applies an algorithm to a layer to add its information to a layer below. Normally with compositing, you would use the luminosity composite mode to add the luminance layer to an RGB layer. But due to the powerful influence of the moonlight, you can see that in this image here how terrible the moonlight is affecting the background. We should consider our options, because compositing can also enhance noise in the background. And if the noise is enhanced, that can show up as unwanted high-frequency information. Composite options that are often good for this job are Lighten, Color Dodge, Screen, Lighten Color, Overlay, Soft Light, and Luminosity. Color Dodge appears to make the nebula itself look pretty good and get a lot of popping color in it, but it really enhances the noise as well, and we don't want that. In fact, after looking through the various composite modes, the luminosity composite mode does indeed appear to be the best composite mode for this job. It provides flat information and appears to neutralize the noise and pebbling. I'm going to apply the luminosity composite to the luminance layer, and then merge those two layers together into a new layer. To merge it, all I have to do is right-click on one of the layers and select Merge Visible. A new layer called Pixel will appear with all the information from the L and RGB layers combined. I'll make the L and RGB layers invisible, we aren't going to need them anymore, and then I'm going to destroy the pixel layer by using the frequency separation tool to tear it in half. I want to fully tear it in half, so I select the radius slider at 100 pixels, fully dividing all the high frequency from the low frequency information. The low frequency layer is made invisible. We don't want it because that's what the moonlight has heavily impacted. We only want the high frequency information. So the high frequency information is all that is left visible, and it is then exported as a lossless TIFF. This exact same process was also used on the information shot on night 2, because it was also shot under the full supermoon. Now you're really going to see where the magic happens, because this is where we apply all the information to create a beautiful finished image that was shot every night during a significant moon and 2 nights under a powerful full supermoon. I've started a new image in Affinity Photo, and on the right you can see the starless low frequency information from night 1. It is the base upon which we are going to build. First of all, I'll add the star layer. We aren't going to need it just yet, but I'd like to get it in there and get a feel for how it's going to affect an image. The star layer was already previously developed when I made the original LRGB image of the night 1 information, using my usual method, which is to duplicate the star layer, screen in one duplicate and color dodge in the other duplicate. Then the duplicates were merged, so now the entire star layer can just be brought into the image and screen composited in. All the screen composite does is tell an image to add its light to the layer below. So that's perfect for when it's time to use the star layer. For now, I'll just set it up to be used later in case we might want to preview the information with the star layer later on. But with the screen composite mode set on the star layer, I'll make it invisible so we can get to the next step. Now I'm going to add in the high frequency information from night 1. High frequency information that is native to low frequency information. In other words, the high frequency information that was shot with the base image should be composited in with linear light. That's the native compositing mode that Affinity Photo uses to add the high frequency information to the low frequency information that was part of it at the beginning. And the moment that's done, we can see some beautiful details start to resolve in the nebula. However, the image remains soft. There is not enough high frequency information. We do have good color, good shadow and brightness. Like I said, that low frequency information does not take long to catch, and we caught all we needed on the first night of imaging. More high frequency information from the preceding nights shot under the full moon will further resolve this image. But before we do that, I'm going to apply synergistic sharpening to this high frequency information to maximize the benefits of its impact on the image. Applying synergistic sharpening is fairly simple. In the high frequency layer, first apply an unsharp mask. After setting that to the sharpness that you want, apply a clarity tool. Make sure the clarity tool is inside of the high frequency layer above the unsharp mask so it adds its effect to the unsharp mask. Once you've adjusted the clarity tool, then add the high pass filter. The high pass filter needs special compositing to be added to the image. For the high pass filter, the linear light composite mode is usually recommended, but for astrophotography, soft light is better. Move the radius slider up until you find the sharpness that you're looking for. There is more to synergistic sharpening than this, but this video isn't really about those details, and if I go into those details here, it'll add a half hour to this video. This is the process of synergistic sharpening in a nutshell though. If you really want to understand it, later watch the videos I made on synergistic sharpening. They're linked below. Before we move on to the next step, it is important to paint out the effects of the sharpening tools on the dark regions of the image. Dark regions do not hold as much information as brighter regions. Brighter regions can benefit much more from sharpening than dark regions. And if you allow that sharpening to bleed into darker regions, they will simply devolve into grittiness. This shows up mostly around the edges of an image, so I'm erasing out now the effect of the sharpening tools on the edges of the image, and it also shows up in the darkest places. Erasing out the effects is easy. All I have to do is select the paintbrush tool. It's circled above and to the left. Select the black color, now circled lower to the left, and set the paintbrush tool itself for mask. Black tells the mask to work as an eraser on any given tool. I'll just quickly erase out the effects of the unsharp mask, clarity tool, and high pass filter around the edge of the entire image and any of the darker space within the image. Now let's make some real magic happen. Watch how effective it is to steal the high frequency information from an image shot directly under the full moon and apply it to this base information. We can't save the color and light from the image under the full moon, but we can sure save that high frequency information, and that's the most important information. It takes a long time to collect, it's delicate, it's resistant to moonlight, and it's where the detail is. This information will be composited onto the image using the soft light composite mode. It's better to use soft light for the additional high frequency layers because it has a gentler effect on the base layer. It's okay, and in fact you should use the linear light composite mode for the first high frequency layer that was shot with the base layer because that's its native composite mode. But for the high layer, high frequency information, it's important to use the soft light mode because it will composite in the additional high frequency information more gently, keeping the image from degrading into grittiness. And just like before, I'm going to apply synergistic sharpening to that layer by applying an unsharp mask, then a clarity tool above that layer, then a high pass filter above that layer, and painting out their effects from around the edges of the image. The image is still soft though. Let's improve that. Let's bring in the high frequency information now from night 3. Night 2 was only a 91% full supermoon. Night 3 was a 96% full supermoon. Let's see if we can use that high frequency information. Just like before, it'll be composited in using the soft light composite mode. And just like before, I'll apply the synergistic sharpening method using the unsharp mask, then clarity tool, then high pass filter to night 3's high frequency information. It really is important to apply these tools to the high frequency information because the high frequency information is not 100% immune to the moonlight. It affects it by creating what you might think of as a bit of spread of light. And these tools pull that spread in, kind of like the way gamma restricts the way colors can spread out in the low frequency information. They pull it in and restrict it and refine the high frequency information, further constricting the effects of any moonlight from it. Now there's one last thing that must be done. Just like synergistic sharpening can very much benefit bright regions of an image where there is a great deal of information, but reduce dark regions of an image into grittiness because there is low information there. Adding the extra high frequency information from nights 2 and 3 can have the same effect. So I want to remove the additional high layer information from the darker regions of the image. However, you can't just paint mask out actual image information in Affinity Photo. You can use the erase tool, which works a lot like the paintbrush, but I don't advise it. It actually erases the information. If you decide later that you want to add something back, it's much more difficult to do so with the erase tool. The best way that I know to erase out the high frequency information from nights 2 and 3 is to put a curves tool in the high frequency layers from nights 2 and 3 above all the sharpening tools. That's the unsharp mask, clarity tool, and high pass filter. Then set the curves tool for alpha. Alpha sets the opacity of the image, and grab the right side of the curve and drag it all the way down, which will pull the opacity of that entire layer all the way down to 0. That will render that layer of high frequency information and all the tools within it invisible. Then invert the tool, which actually makes everything visible again. I know it's a little counterintuitive, but this is the easiest way to do it. You can go up to the layer drop-down menu and select invert, or you can just click Ctrl-I. Then select the paintbrush tool, make sure it's set for mask, and select the color white. This will paint back in the 0 alpha of the curves tool, meaning wherever you paint over with the white paintbrush tool, the high frequency information will be removed from that spot. Using the white paintbrush demasking tool, and with the curves tool selected in the layers on the right, paint over the edges of the image and all the darkest regions of the image. So doing, all that additional high frequency information will be removed from that low information region of the image, preventing it from devolving into grittiness, which really looks awful. Do this with every high layer of high frequency information that you add to the image. If you aren't used to working with layers, that probably seems somewhat convoluted and counterintuitive, and I wouldn't blame you if it does. It took me a couple of years of using layer-based photo editors to wrap my head around that procedure. But believe me when I tell you it is a much better way to remove image information from an image than using the erase tool. The erase tool has a much more permanent effect, and all you can really do about the erase tool if you want to get information back is undo it. Whereas all you have to do to get information back with the painting over the curves alpha method is just paint the information back in by switching a paintbrush tool to black. You can even control how much of that information you paint back in by changing the hardness and flow of the paintbrush. This way is much more reversible and flexible. The image is looking very nicely defined now, and bear in mind 2/3 of this high frequency information was shot directly under a full moon. Let's go ahead and add back our stars. And there you have it. IC 5146, base information acquired on a night of a 56% moon, so especially important for getting good low frequency information, and 2/3 of the high frequency information acquired during nights of the full moon. Let's do a quick review. Here are some important terms and concepts you should understand to effectively steal information back from the moonlight. And here is a quick summary of the entire stealing back information from the moonlight procedure. I've been working on this technique for months, and the main reason it took months is because I had to wait till nights when I had clear nights during a full moon. And we all know how the sky doesn't like to cooperate and give us things when we need them. The test has been completed on IC 5146. I am now running a new test of the technique on the Bubble Nebula. I was able to acquire sufficient high-frequency information during the end of the full supermoon, but now I need a clear night so I can acquire the low-frequency information. I also would like a clear night so I can acquire more dark night information on IC 5146, so I can run a full comparison and contrast and get a realistic sense of the capabilities and limits of this method. At this time, I anticipate that the limits of the method are: 1. If you can actually shoot an image under dark sky conditions, you will probably get finer high-frequency information and be able to resolve a bit more detail. And of course, with integration time under dark skies, you would probably acquire a little bit more in the way of color, light, and shadow in the low-frequency information. So I'm by no means saying that this technique will be 100% as good as shooting during a dark night. Right now, because I need to do more experimentation, I can't give you a percentage number of how good it is though. But as you can see, you do get very acceptable results with this technique. You can add high frequency information acquired under bright moonlight conditions to a little bit of low frequency information acquired when the sky was better, and get fantastic results with great sharpness and detail, color, brightness, and shadow. And that really is the main strength of this technique. It allows us astrophotographers to keep on shooting when the moon is bright. I mean, how many times have you not set up, or if you have an observatory, just kept it closed because you had gorgeous skies but a bloody full moon? With this technique, we don't have to do that anymore. We can keep right on acquiring good information regardless of what the moon is doing. Please be aware that this technique also requires more testing on OSC information and narrowband information. I'm currently working on testing it with narrowband with the Bubble Nebula project. I am aware that this is an expert-level technique and presupposes a significant amount of foundational understanding of photographic developing theory. Most of that theory can be found within the videos on the Sky Story channel at this time, and I will be making more videos in the future that walk you step by step through each developing part of this procedure. Thank you for watching, and please let me know how your own experiments with this technique of stealing information back from the moon go for you. If you have any thoughts, observations, or questions, please leave them in the comments section below. And thank you for everybody who's been so supportive of the Sky Story community. I really and truly appreciate it, and I never thought when I started this little channel about 1.5 years ago that it would turn into anything like this. Thank you to everyone. Please take a moment to hit those like and subscribe buttons, and get out there and shoot that sky even if the moon is full.